This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall. CJAD 800.
That is James MENNIE over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, big rally Saturday. Lots of folks turned up, perhaps more than some might have thought or feared wouldn't turn up. The question we asked off the top of the show, I'm curious to know what you think, is basically, so what's next? What does this change, if anything, and what will it take to change anything?
I'm not entirely sure it's going to change anything whatsoever. As I've said before, and I think we're all of us sort of unanimous in this, until this becomes as big an issue outside of the non-Francophone community or the Francophone community as it is within the non-Francophone community, the Legault government's going to get away with this completely illegal law. But I saw some reasons for hope. Certainly, the Francophone press did cover it. Some installations said it was hundreds who showed up. I'm not entirely, from the images that I saw, that I think thousands is far more accurate, and I base that on 30 years of covering demonstrations. I know you can't get an exact number, but getting tangled up in numbers, I think, is going to be a dead end. When I see a columnist like Yves Boisvert over at La Presse, a very respected columnist, a very well-read columnist, basically laying out this law for what it is, not just a completely unnecessary, slap in the face to non-Francophone Quebec, but also an utterly illegal law, that it oversteps everywhere, that this the powers it's giving language inspectors, the interference in the court system, that's all there. And if someone's already done it, I apologize, but this is the first Francophone commentator in Francophone media that I've seen lay out the situation this way, to write about Bill 96 as something other than being a shill for the Legault government, saying that this is long overdue and French is in danger and so on and so forth. All that said, excuse me, the pressure has to be kept up. How do you do it? I'm not sure we can have weekend rallies on a regular basis between now and Election Day, although that might be nice. I suggested last week that maybe we should take this fight outside of Quebec. And obviously, we don't waste our time in Canada, because every federal politician won't touch this with a barge pole. They seem to be less concerned with the Charter of Rights than they are with winning seats in Quebec. But as I say, if you mention this to our neighbors to the south, who are huge sources of tourism, or indeed our neighbors even further south, Mexico loves Quebec. And once again, ask the question: are you really sure that if something happens, you have to go to a hospital, you will be served in a language that you can understand? Or because remember, Bill 96, you can't even get yourself a translator. Now it's interesting. Simon Jean Barrette was interviewed today, and I don't know if you saw his reaction. It's the usual, oh no, don't worry, your rights are protected, which of course is absolute rubbish. That the concerns of Anglophones are unfounded is a demonstrable lie. Maybe he'll get away with that, maybe he won't. But I have a sneaking suspicion that no matter what I say, no matter what the English language media say, the Legault government will be paying very, very close attention to what media that has access to Francophone do with this law. And I think maybe down the road, as it becomes increasingly apparent that this is not just the law that is going to have a negative effect on Anglophone Quebecers, but on all Quebecers, maybe cooler heads will prevail. I'm not sure, but I also notice now that there's a lot of variables, not all of them positive, that are piling up on Francois Legault's plate, and perhaps maybe he just wants to remove a few of the more contentious sticks of dynamite from this bill, because I think he's going to have a lot more problems on his hands than just language issues between now and Election Day.
You have to wonder, and what you said, I guess, would be great if it could actually happen, like outside of Montreal, if you could see these sorts of demonstrations happen. I don't think that's likely to happen, Jim. But then you say, you're right, could the CAQ face a fight in the regions? What's going on there that we're not paying attention to?
A lot is going on there that, we are paying attention to it, but I think maybe we don't realize the geographical importance. Even today, the Conseil de Patronat, which is Quebec's largest employers group, which basically is a province-wide organization, has told the Legault government to take off their rose-colored glasses, get real on immigration, and double your immigration levels. We are short 240,000 employees for jobs that have to be done now, and it's not happening. Francois Legault, as is his usual want, essentially waiting for someone to raise it. He thinks everything is fine until, of course, the pressure grows, or maybe his numbers go down on the latest, either the public or internal polls. But not just that. The Parti Québécois, which has zero chance of perhaps even surviving the next election, at least has the sense to know if you're going to beat this government, you have to beat them in the regions. They have offered an additional $1 billion in a very theoretical pact government to fund infrastructure to actually make it possible to do a lot of things in the regions that don't involve having to come to Montreal. Same thing with Dominique Anglade and the Liberals. Her charter for the regions, the idea that the regions should have far more say in how they're being governed, as opposed to being little satrapies that are run by basically from Francois Legault's desk. That, I think, is going to start getting through to the Premier, only because this is CAQ land. And perhaps he was expecting to have a fight with the usual suspects from the usual parts of the province. But this is quite literally, no matter who does it, this is quite literally taking a fight to Francois Legault's front door by going into the regions and asking a very simple question: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And really listen to what the answers are. I think you may be surprised. Remember, this is a government that, because of our system, won a huge majority with about 37% of the vote. In terms of the entire electorate, less than 1/4 of eligible voters voted for the Coalition Avenir Québec. More than half, in fact, voted for the other side, but they just slipped up through the middle. Will this lightning strike again? I'm not entirely sure, but a good way to make sure that it does it is to do what the opposition finally seems to be doing, is focusing on the regions. It doesn't, may not sound fair for Montrealers or our listeners right now, but folks, elections, whether it was the CAQ, the Liberals, the PACs, it was always the regions. If you don't win there and you don't win Francophones, you don't win the government. Sorry, it may seem unfair, but, politics, like life, is unfair.
That's such a good point. I was thinking about how, Dominique Anglade vowed to have this outreach program, right? And we were all concerned about, you got to take care of Anglophones. You got to take Anglophones into account first and foremost. But no, not at all. If there's any hope of actually having them in opposition, but also perhaps, I dare to even dream about this government not winning in the next election, but it's got to be done in the regions. Just bringing it back to the protests for a quick moment, Jim. Some people seem to take issue with the fact that Dominique Anglade showed up at the Bill 96 rally on Saturday. I was just curious for your thoughts on that quickly.
Well, I don't know who the people might be, but quite frankly, if I was an Anglophone or an Allophone confronted with Bill 96, I would not be turning away anyone who participated in that demonstration. There's some people say, well, she's being very opportunistic, and listen, if she'd been stronger with non-Francophones and didn't take them for granted, perhaps this wouldn't have happened at all. And of course, there's the infamous gaffe for the amendment to Bill 96, which actually they had to beg the CAQ to water down because, to a certain extent, the Quebec Liberals were being more Catholic than the Pope when it came to access to CEGEPs in Quebec. But all that said, they showed up. I think Quebecers, Francophone, Anglophone, are intelligent enough to make their choice in October, either based on her showing up or based on her party's performance in terms of if that's going to be your hill to die on. If it's a performance on protecting the rights of Quebecers, well, you can make it your decision. The record speaks for itself. But honestly, this was not some sacrosanct, religious procession. This was a long overdue expression of frustration and presence. Thousands, I don't know how many thousands. There were thousands.
Thousands.
It's been a long time, outside of a St. Pat's parade, that I've seen that many non-Francophones gather together in downtown Montreal.
Same.
So, I don't think we can choose who comes or who doesn't come. And as I say, you can make your judgment of a party based on their policies, rather than their daily agenda. But all that said, this issue is not over, and yes, it'll be challenged in court. And I hate to say it to my elected representatives in Ottawa, like it or not, you're going to be sucked into this maelstrom, and you better have more than "it's none of my business" the next time you're asked about Bill 96 in Quebec, because this is not just a Quebec issue; It's a Canadian issue. It's a rights issue.
Jim, we're out of time. 15 seconds. Do you support the idea, Eric Duhem and Dominic Anglade wanting to have an English debate minus the Premier?
I said that last week. I think I will never say no to any debate in Quebec for an election.
James MENNIE at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, thank you.
Adamant.